Let's demonstrate how to use the 4 steps to allocate costs in a process costing system. The 4 steps are listed for us. The first thing we're going to need to do is compute physical units. The next thing is to compute equivalent units. The third is to compute unit costs. And then the fourth is to assign costs. We've been given the following data. We have some information about the units, and then we have some information about the costs. So let's read through what we've got. We know that we have 60,000 units in our beginning work in process, which for us is the month of May 1st. They were 100% complete as to direct materials. They were 80% complete as to conversion costs at the beginning of the period. We started 540,000 units into production, new units. We completed and transferred 520,000 out of our department, and then we had 80,000 left over at the end of the month on May the 31st. With regards to the ending inventory, those that were left were 100% complete for direct materials. We put those in process at the beginning of the period. And they were 75% complete as to conversion cost. Remember, when we talk about conversion costs, prime costs and conversion cost, prime costs can be direct materials and direct labor. Conversion costs are direct labor and factory overhead. So usually you'll see that split of you have direct materials. How do you get those raw materials into a finished product? Well, you have to convert raw materials. And to convert those, you have people, laborers that physically do something to them, and also you have equipment and other types of overhead that are used to aid and assist in converting those materials. So that's the reason we call those conversion costs, but we're talking about your direct labor and your manufacturing overhead with that term. Now to the right of that we have costs. So these are our dollar figures associated. For our beginning work in process balances, the direct materials associated with that balance is $35,000 and the conversion costs are $30,000. So we have a total of $65,000 in our beginning inventory for work in process. Now, for the items that were brought in or new things, those costs that we added into production for the month of May. For direct materials, we added in $445,000, and we had conversion costs of $202,000 to make that a total of $650,000. We really, let's see if I can draw you a line here. We should have a line right about there, right about here. Those are total figures for us, just adding those together. So this is the information. Based on this, let's see if we can work through the 4 steps to figure out how to allocate costs, because this is how costs are allocated in a process cost system. Very different than the job order cost where we used a job costing sheet, and we allocated overhead on that predetermined rate. Not going to do that with a process system. So let's start with number 1. We want to compute the physical units. And I'll flip back and forth for you so you can be reminded of the data that we're given. They gave us a lot of this information about units, and that's where we're going to pull to get our physical flow of units to figure out exactly what happened. So let's look. We started out with 60,000 in beginning inventory. So let's just put, I'm going to shortcut work in process with just WIP, May 1st. Alright, we started out with 60,000 units. So we'll put that over here. Alright, let's go back and look. Alright, then we started some additional units. We started 540,000 units. So, just write units started. Hopefully you can read my chicken scratch. Now it's $540,000. So, our total here is $600,000. Now we also want to look at what was completed and transferred over to the next department. Well, see, we had 520,000 units that was completed and transferred. Completed, and I'm going to run out of room. Transferred 520,000. Then we had ending work in process, 80,000 units. So work in process on May the 31st, 80,000. So the total here is, ta-da, $600,000. That's good. If it wasn't, we would have had something wrong. Those two should equal. Okay, so we've got our physical units. We know all the units that we should be assigning those costs to. Takes us to step 2. Compute equivalent units. Equivalent units are important. It's the basis for how we assign out the costs. We don't assign out costs evenly because we don't process them necessarily evenly. Now we're going to be using the weighted average method. So if we go back to our home units, actually we're going to be focusing on this set of data if we're using weighted average. If you're using something like FIFO, first in, first out, where you're using a physical flow, which many companies use FIFO, but you can use weighted average as well. Your text highlights the weighted average method, so that's what I'm going to demonstrate to you. If you are an accounting major, however, I would highly suggest that you look at the appendix to the chapter. It's going to show you how to calculate it based on the FIFO method, and some texts highlight or emphasize that instead of the weighted average. So if you're going on to higher level accounting courses, I would suggest that you look over the FIFO method as well so that you'll be familiar with it. But again, we're going to look at weighted average. So we're looking at an end result here. So we want to look at that completed and transferred out, and then anything that's left over in ending inventory. So let's go here. All right, equivalent units. So I want to see how much process has been done on all of these. And again, to refresh, we're looking at completed and transferred, and we're also looking at our ending work in process. All right, so let's go back to our data for a minute and look. Well, our completed and transferred. Since this is weighted average, we're assuming that all the materials were applied to it and all the conversion, because it's done. But our ending work in process, we know that for materials 100% was complete, but only 75% was complete for conversion. Okay. Well, how many units did we complete and transfer? Looks like 520. Again, use that physical flow as well. So if they're 100% done, then we can look at, and with equivalent units, you need to look at a difference between materials and conversion, because these aren't applied the same way. Well, for materials, all 520,000 units were applied at 100%, as well as conversion. They're done and off to the next department. Work in process, however, we know we had 80,000 physical units. They were 100% complete for direct materials and 75% for conversion. So we can put all 80,000 under the materials because 100% of those were complete. But for the conversion, we can only put 75% there. So we need to put 60,000 units there. Let's just total this. So that gives me 600,000 equivalent units for materials, 580,000 for conversion. This is the basis for assigning the costs. So now we can actually compute our unit costs. I'm going to go back one more time. Let's look at the dollars now. Okay. So again, we're looking at our total amount spent for direct materials. Okay, we'll look at materials first. Well, you can see that we had $35,000 in direct materials in the beginning balance, and we added in $445,000. Under weighted average, we need to consider all that as far as the dollar amounts, not necessarily our physical units or equivalent units. So we've got, for materials, let's go over. We had our work in process beginning, materials, conversion. We had 35,000 in materials beginning, and we had 30,000 in conversion. Again, I'm getting this data here, 35 and the 30. For that incurred in production, we had 445 and 202. So let's add those in. So our production for this month, we added 445 45, and 202,000. So we've got total costs here of 480,000 and 232,000. Now, that gives me just our total dollars we have in materials and our total dollars in conversion costs. We need to assign those out. Again, I said the basis for that is going to be those equivalent units. Don't use physical units off that physical flow that we did. That's not how we assign costs. We need equivalent units. They're not all the same. Everybody doesn't get 100% of everything each period. So we need to calculate those equivalent units first. Well, if we go back one, we can see that we had equivalent units for materials, a total of 600,000 units. So I'll just put EU, equivalent unit. We had 600,000 for materials, put $1 so we know the difference here. So that means that my cost per equivalent unit for materials is 80 cents. 480,000 divided by 600,000 units gives me 80 cents. For conversion, our total equivalent unit was $580,000. So, sorry, not dollars, 580,000 units. So we're going to divide that into $232,000, and that gives me 40 cents per equivalent unit for conversion. That means that for instance, materials, that $480,000 in total, we're going to split it up over the 600,000 equivalent units. And for the conversion, we're going to take all that 232 and divide it up over the 580,000 equivalent units. Not over the total units, but over equivalent. So we're going to spread that cost based on how it was used for the units. So we're ready for step 4. We can actually assign the costs now. We figured out the cost per unit, so now I can assign it and associate it, and allocate it out. First, let's do a double check. Let's make sure we know what are our total costs that we're going to be assigning. Well, we've got beginning work in process. Let's go back and look. What were the total costs we had for beginning work in process? All of our costs, materials and conversion, that was $65,000. So let's go put that in here. We had 65,000. And if we go back and look at what we incurred during production, again, all of our costs, materials and conversion, you'll see that we have $650,000 right here, total. So we'll put 650,000 here. Going to add those together. So in total, we're looking at assigning out $712,000. Now we've already figured out our cost per equivalent unit. So I'm going to just you can make up a very formal cost reconciliation schedule. I'm just going to do a very informal little assignment kind of a thing so you can see easily. Let me erase this so we've got enough room. Okay, so you can see it fairly easily, I hope. So again, remember, we've got materials, we've got conversion, and our materials were at 80 cents per unit, and our conversion was 40 cents per unit. So we had that completed and transferred. 80 cents per unit. Well, what was our equivalent unit for this? Let's go back and look. Alright, for materials, that's our dollars, sorry. For materials, our completed and transferred, we had 520,000 units. Okay, so we're going to take 520,000 units at a rate of 80 cents per unit, and that's going to give me a dollar total of $416,000. Alright, now, wait, before I go back. We also have our ending work in process. So let's go back and look at equivalent units for that. Oh, went too far, sorry. We had $80,000 in equivalent units for materials for our ending work in process. and we are applying that at a rate of 80 cents per unit. So that should come to $64,000 for our ending work in process. That gives me a total of $480,000 for the application of our material cost. Now, also need to look at conversion. Okay? Conversion costs are 40 cents per unit. So let's look at our equivalent unit for completed and transferred. We had 520,000 equivalent units. So if we apply that at a rate of 40 cents per unit, that's a total of $208,000. For work in process ending balance, we had equivalent units of 60,000 units for conversion. So we apply that at a basis of 40 cents per unit, so that comes to $24,000 for ending. And that's a total of $232,000. Now, if we do a total column, I ran out of room on the page, but if we would total this up, you can see these two are going to total up to $712,000. And that's good because remember back here, oh no, sorry. Losing my dollars. Well, when we added them up, it's what I erased. When we added up all of our total costs, we added up to $712,000. If we can't tie back, somehow we haven't assigned out all the costs. We need to assign out all of those on some basis. Our basis is equivalent units. Now, if I put over here, if I had some room for it, I could put a total column for you. The total of completed and transferred out, both materials and conversion, would be, I'll write them over here for you, would be $624,000. And the total for ending work in process would be $88,000. And again, that total is $712,000. So we know that we have assigned out all of our costs. We've assigned them on the basis of equivalent units using the weighted average method.